Hello, my name is Bogdan and today I'm to speak about Maria Montessori and her teaching method. Welcome to theeducation.com. The Montessori method of education developed by Maria Montessori is a child-centered educational approach based on scientific observations of children. Montessori's method has been used for over 100 years in many parts of the world. The Montessori method views the child as the one who is naturally eager for knowledge and capable of initiating learning in a supportive, thoughtfully prepared learning environment. It attempts to develop children physically, socially, emotionally, and cognitively. Although a range of practices exist under the name Montessori, we cite these elements as essential. First of all, this is about being staged classrooms with children from 2 and up to 6 years that are far, from common. Let's say you have a class where 1 to 4 children are, 6 to 10, and so on. And let's say 15 to 18 years old classrooms exist as well. Also, this is about students' choice of activity from within a prescribed range of options. So children tend to choose more and more during the class, and it's very, very interesting because it doesn't really follow the industrial way of doing things. The education that's emerged in the 18th century with the rise of industrialization, where the teachers were just the rules of the school factory, and they were talking like, do like this or do like that. If you don't do, you receive a punishment. If yes, maybe you would receive some gift or reward. But basically in Montessorian school it's very different. So student choice is being regarded as one interesting for everyone, so it's important. Then it's children are given uninterrupted blocks of work time, ideally 3 hours. It means we don't have this 45 minutes shifts that, let's say, in Eastern Europe, they're still here and they're very strict. So the moment you get really into the topic of physics, math, some languages, foreign or native, when you really get interrupted by the teacher who says, no, you can't really do it, something else should be done now. Montessori didn't believe that. She thought, well, it's time to have something long, because long thinking is what we really need. Then she was a big advocate of constructivist or discovery model, where students learn concepts from working with materials rather than by direct instructions. Then some specialized educational materials were developed by Montessori and her collaborators were made out of natural aesthetic materials such as wood rather than plastic. However, the basic thing was developed 100 years ago, basically, because that was the time before World War I, when it was coming to the being in Western Europe, Eastern Europe, and overseas in the Americas. It was very ecological in thinking, like less plastic, more materials, or more natural materials. Then, of course, the main word here is freedom, but not freedom, not to do anything, but a freedom to do something. So it's like Montessori believed that we need to dedicate more time for children to do what they really want to do, and that was an important thing. Also, a big part of Montessorian thing was a teacher. Montessorian teacher is very different from the usual type of teacher. The teacher is very experienced and listens more than talks, so that less formal instructions, more listening and seeing what the child is really good at, and then trying to direct the child. First of all, before speaking more on the method itself, I need to give some small part of the speech piece of the speech on the history, since it's highly needed to develop that. Well, we know that Montessori herself was a scientist. She had, for example, medical training, where she began to develop this educational philosophy and methods. It was back to the 1897. She attended courses in pedagogy at the University of Rome. She read the educational theory of the previous 200 years. She visited Rome's asylums for the insane children when she was like a young teacher. She used her observations of mistreatment of the children there to read all she could intellectually disabled children, which led to the creation of her new form of education. And first classroom was opened in the 1907 in the Casa dei Bambini, or the Children's House in Italian. She was Italian herself. And it was a 10-man building in Rome. So from that very beginning in this Casa dei Bambini, she experimented a lot. She made a lot of observation of children, and a lot of lessons were made by her. And she thought of her work something like scientific pedagogy. In 1901, Maria Montessori met Alice and Leopoldo Franchetti in Città di Castello, and they found the collaboration basically started from that time. Maria Montessori was invited to hold her first course for teachers and set up a Casa dei Bambini at Villa Montesca, the home of the Franchetti. And from that time, a lot of collaboration happened, and it was influenced by Alice Franchetti. And unfortunately, she died, but still, we still need to have as pedagogues, as the people who work, with pedagogy, to remember this name as well, not just Maria's. We know that it moved throughout, the Europe and overseas, and also in America, in the United States precisely, from 1912, it began to be really widely known, and a lot of ideas were spread. However, they had their own implications, and we cannot really say that, the implications were as Montessori really thought of them. So, as with the religion, every country, every society, every community has its own, specifics, and let's say the words are here, but the practice is somewhere here, and sometimes it doesn't really match. Sometimes very different, so, yeah. What about the theory more? Well, of course it's about human development, and human here regarded as the word with, child-centrism. All educational approach is then centered on the child, and its core is only the child. So everything for the child, administration for the child, not the child for the administrations. It happens, let's say, in Europe, where I'm currently studying in, teaching in, and where I currently also try to understand why children sometimes are so weak and why they are sometimes so strong. Because Soviet Union's education, and we still here in Ukraine have it, has a lot from this 19th, 18th century industrial model of education, where you sit like in a factory, 45 minutes, 8 lessons, so you need to work as in a factory. If you don't, you don't better do it, right? About Montessori's approach, it was totally different. The model basically has two major principles, and the first one is that children and developing adults engage in psychological self-construction. Psychological self-construction, it's like, wow, it's really in your opening and really here. It was a big surprise that even here it exists, but in some schools, but I never attended one until I started to work on it. Self-construction basically means that you need to find it yourself. It means that you need to develop your critical skills, you need to develop what is better for you, and in this, industrial education is very hard to do because no one really taught it. Second, the children, especially under the age of 6, have an innate path of psychological development. Based on her observations, Montessori believed that children who are at liberty to choose and act freely within an environment prepared according to her model would act spontaneously for optimal development. So it's a big opening, so less teacher, more self-building time, self-construction time, and it's a big opening, honestly, because you can say, well, it doesn't work. How is possible that children will do it themselves? They're like very small, and how can they find path to development? But Montessori was not afraid of that. She thought that, well, yes, there are some universal values that are there, and children need to be taught, but they are innate. They are these values are already there in the soul of the children, so they are born good people. And our let's say aim, our goal is, as the teachers, is not to crush their inner goodness. There was, of course, a debate about that, about values. about characteristics, about innate characteristics of the child, because on that depended a lot. And in this Montessorian approach, there are she listed like human tendencies, let's say, that are driving behavior in every stage of development. And education, and educational systems should somehow respond and facilitate their expression. So that was abstraction, activity, communication, exactness, exploration, manipulation of the environment, she meant. Order, orientation, repetition, self-perfection, and work. Here we can say purposeful activity is the term that would use in Italian language she wrote in, very important to stress that here we have the word order. Some people think that, Montessori school is something like a hub for children that do what they want. And in some way, it can't be said like that. Because, well, there should be some order, but Montessori meant that children should understand the need of order themselves, because that's their innate need to make orderly things, to make things in order. So we will go about that, border between order and mass a bit later. Of course, Montessorian education was about a lot of free activities. The thing is, free activity here doesn't mean that you can do everything you want. Yeah, as I said, it's not that hub that you give your child to this Montessorian school. You go to work, you earn money with your wife, if you're a man, or okay, it doesn't matter. That you earn money and you give your child and they're spending their time and everyone is happy because children do what they want, and you may think, well, they develop their skills. But no, free activity means it's more free activity, it's freer activity, freer production of meanings, production of something whatsoever. It depends on the task, on the subject, but like that, excuse me. But the thing is, the teacher should prepare the environment, and this notion of prepared environment is very, very important here. Since the environment is making the children believe this or that thing and make them do this or that thing. So basically it means if you have a class and they can do whatever they want, well, you can say them, here is your goal, you should well achieve it. Or you have not so high goal, let's say, it's not so serious, but still you should achieve it. And the child would take the things that he or she already sees in front of him. So basically it means this prepared environment is, the key, the cornerstone of all this building of Montessori teaching the class. First of all, this environment should be tailored to basic human characteristics, to the specific characteristics of children at different ages, and to the individual personalities of each child. So basically it means, well, it's the Montessorian teacher, and now he says the teacher overall, you should be very, very, let's say, prepared in human psychology. So for her, teaching is not just putting information in their heads, it's like making the environment. That is harder, but more interesting, because children in the long term develop much more important skills for their, whole life than you may think about. So basically, to speak, like the lines from the book, we can say that the function of this environment is to help and allow the child to develop independence, I stress here, in all areas according to his and her inner psychological directives. In addition to offering access to the Montessori materials appropriate to the age of children, the environment should exhibit the following characteristics. So I'll just read it up and then comment on each. First of all, this is an arrangement that facilitates movement and activity. Second, beauty and harmony, cleanliness of environment. Freaktivity in proportion to the child and her needs, or his needs, Then a limitation of materials, so that only material that supports the child's development is included. Then order. Then nature in the classroom and outside of the classroom. So it's like a utopia. You put the children in the utopia, like the environment that was created by you, or by some group of teachers, it depends, right? So, and in this utopia, the child is growing up, and like tree in the with very good soil, with a perfect watering, it is blossoming. But the thing is, if you put too much water, it's already very bad, right? Some trees, if they are not tropical, if they would like more, let's say, dry environment, they would just die in some time because too much water. But if you see that the plant, or like metaphor for the kid right here, obviously, if you say that if you see that the kid is for another environment, it's, let's say, for this plant, usually, okay, this plant would feel awesome in the jungle. So that making them not to have water is, not the best option at all. So here you should see the difference between these desert children and jungle children and some other kinds of children. I just put it in the metaphor, and it's a very simple metaphor, but still I hope that you will understand me here. Of course, nature was a big part of the game, so that's living in the nature of the harmony and finding that harmony is border, where the nature has to take part, to participate more, where the humans should. There's very interesting here. Of course, I need to comment also about limitations in order, because this order thing really disturbs me a lot. Because some people in Eastern Europe think, well, they say we had a disastrous education here in the Eastern Bloc, Eastern part of Europe. I'm myself from Kiev, Ukraine. And still, we have this, as I said, post-Soviet education based on industrial mighty of the Soviet Union. Questionable, of course, was it a mighty or not, but still, the school was like a real factory with shaming their bad behaved children and embracing absolute, let's say, nerds in the bad way. Sorry for the laxity, but still. So the Montessorian, so some people here can see Montessorian, education is this a bit different, let's say, notion where everything is possible, but not. Montessori herself said that, well, the materials proposed to a child should be limited. It's not that you can give everything, and let's say if you want a child to count well and to use a lot of counting through some activity, well, it's very unwise to give the smartphone. If you talk in today's terms, like back to the days, she couldn't say smartphone because she had any idea of that. But now we would say like this. So if you want the child to make more logic, give the things that would help her, to develop the logic. And of course, order. This is a very interesting notion because order by different cultures, it's understood in a different way. So what about periods or planes that she saw in children? She was a very interesting woman because she made a huge research in the field. And she developed her own, understanding of the children's behaviors. So she observed 4 distinct periods or planes in human development, extending from birth to 6 years, then 6-12, 12-18, and then 18-24. And she saw different characteristics, different modes, developmental imperatives active in each of these planes, and called 4 educational approaches specific to each period. So the first plane extends from birth to around 6 years of age, and during this period Montessori observed that the child undergoes striking physical and psychological development. The first plane child is seen as a concrete sensorial explorer and learner, engaged for the developmental work of psychological self-construction and building functional independence. Montessori introduced several concepts to explain her work, including the absorbent mind, sensitive periods, and normalization. Montessori described the young child's behavior of effortlessly assimilating the sensorial stimuli of his or her environment, including information from the senses, language, culture, and the development of concepts with the term absorbent mind. She believed that this is a power unique to discovered periods of specific sensitivity to particular stimuli during this time, which she called the sensitive period. In Montessori education, the classroom environment responds to these periods by making appropriate materials and activities available while the periods are active in each individual young child. She identified the following periods with their durations. First of all, it's acquisition of language, up to 6 years old. Then interest in small objects is from 18 months to 3 years old. That is about the order, it's from 1 to 3 years old. The sensory refinement from birth to around 4 years old. Then social behavior from around 2 to 4 years old, something like this. By the way, she observed in children from 3 to 6 years old a psychological state she called normalization, and this normalization arises from concentration and focusing activity which serves the child's developmental need, and is characterized by the ability to concentrate as well as spontaneous discipline, continuous and happy work, social sentiments of help and sympathy for others. So as you see, from this part, she insisted that from this young development is the key part. So let's say I saw a lot of cases myself when the child, because of the parents should have moved somewhere abroad to earn money for their family, for their new house or something like this, she left the children for their aunt or grandmother, or both grandmother, grandfather, or kind of a cultural family, as a very good term that I've recently came through when I was listening to some Jordan Peterson's, shared videos on psychology on YouTube, highly recommended by the way. So she insisted on that, and what was my example about is that the children that are brought up by some other cultural parents as their grandmother or both the couple, they had very different understanding of things, and sometimes parents don't understand, the real parents, biological ones, like why their child is so different, the children so different. I mean, I was with my boy or girl from when he was 5 years old, and why she doesn't understand order as I do, why does has different values, and as I said, Montessori has its own answer. Well, because it depends on who brought up the child when you're up to 6 years old. So some people do not understand it, and that's very important here. If you go to the second plane of development, it's about 6 to 12 years old. She says that's about psychical and psychological changes in children developed in a classroom environment, lessons and materials to respond to these new challenges. Psychologically, she observed these herd instincts, the tendency to work and socialize in groups, as well as the powers of reason and imagination. So she believed, yes, they need a society, and that's not good, for them to divorce from the society. The third plane of development extends from around 12 to 18 years of age, encompassing the period of adolescence. And Montessori characterized the third plane by the physical changes of puberty and adolescence, but also psychological changes. She emphasizes the psychological instability and difficulties, so it has also its own thing when you should not crush the children because they want to try something else, because they are very unsure about themselves, and some people remain actually in puberty for all their lives. They're crying a lot when something is not working. And they should really come through this age, and you should not punish them. Actually, I want to stress that Montessori was really against this negative motivation that a lot of people use. She was she wasn't a fan of it. What she told about young adults from 18 to 24 is that she envisioned young adults prepared by the experience of Montessori education at the lower levels, ready to fully embrace the study of culture and science in order to influence and lead civilization. So she believed that, in that time, people should have their own money. At that time, it was critical. She said that we should teach them to learn all their lives in that period and be interested in culture. So it's embedded there. The most important thing here is that you see, it's to be a Montessorian teacher, you should be very educated, let's say, and you should speak less, because teachers have this teacher talking time when you can really put the idea of the child much better because of experience, because of education that the child is only, to gain in the nearest future or not nearest, it doesn't matter. So she was against this, like the child should open it by himself or herself, and that's the most important part, the self-discovery thing. Well, she also taught that we should create an environment without the war, so without, cruel competition. And as far as we know, sometimes it's really hard to compare, to make some, especially if you are in the country that's in society of which there is not really such a thing. Let's say Norway making this Montessorian classroom ideal one where you are bringing peace, and people really, students really don't imagine themselves being, in the war with someone. So the peace, peace accelerating environment. So let's say in some other countries that have much more aggressive environments, it's very hard. But on the other hand, she embraced and she said that, well, we should create an environment that brings peace. That is of a high importance. First of all, you should understand that there are a lot of videos of how does it really work in YouTube, for example. Of course, you should also know that some of the ideas were a bit utopist. From which regard? That there is no ideal society, there is no ideal politics, no ideal economics, there is no ideal and perfect in functioning, let's say, education as well. And there are not perfect toddlers, so teenagers. But this human-based approach really made a revolution in the way that we started to see children as a bit different from adults, and that's this idea that they should be treated from different angle really influenced a lot of classrooms all over the world. That is the biggest advance. Of course, some of the things like bringing peace, sometimes it's possible in some environments, sometimes no, but the idea is that we should try to create more and more suitable environment to bring prosperity and well-functioning personalities into the world. So thank you for listening to me. I would be really happy to have a conversation with you. Maybe I got mistaken somewhere, but and so on, and on the other regard, write in the comments and emails. So have a nice evening. See you. Enjoy and wait for the next video.